It's almost the end of 2024. Observing pride flags flying over governmental buildings, rainbow colors on random advertisements, and online influencers creating TikTok and Instagram posts expressing queerness publicly for attention would be a lie to say they are not at least somewhat cathartic in 2024. Over the past 20 years, so much has changed. Queer people have gone from being an underground minority that is always afraid of prosecution to, at least, people having to pretend they like us for our money. Since coming out as gay, I have participated in a lot of things within the community. I have watched all the regular and all-star seasons of RuPaul's Drag Race. I can recite the monologue from Designing Woman, and I watched Eurovision religiously until this year, which traditionally associated with being within the queer community. I have received a lot of love and friendship in the community, which has allowed me to have a safe space to discover myself and be with my chosen family. In a roundabout way, it has saved my life. But this year, I have been reflecting. What makes me feel that I must identify as non-binary, more specifically agender, years later? Society would have likely accepted me as a gay man without question. Sure, I occasionally wear dresses and makeup, I generally present in an androgynous manner, and I majored in STEM during my undergrad studies, which seems to be a key indicator today of being either transgender or furry or both. However, none of them are really the key reasons why I feel the need to have a label slapped on myself to feel comfortable with myself. I was able to continue doing all the things I do today, including call myself a man for more than 20 years before I even knew what non-binary is, and my life was fine before then. Why do I, along with many others, feel the need to assign labels to ourselves while simultaneously asserting that they hold no significance? What difference does it make with the same or different pronoun as before? What makes people non-binary? What makes me non-binary? According to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, non-binary as a term means relating to or being a person who identifies with or expresses a gender identity that is neither entirely male nor entirely female. This practically is correct, but at the same time tells basically nothing. Sure, you could argue that it is as simple as, well, if someone wants to say they are non-binary, I guess they are non-binary. However, does someone's claim to be non-binary, even sincerely, mean they have the inherent right to claim that identity? In that sense, should we also encourage people to be transracial if someone simply wishes it so? There are a few questions that need to be addressed to make the answer clearer. Namely, what is gender identity? What does it mean for a person to identify with or express a certain gender? What does an entirely male or female gender identity entail, and henceforth, what does a gender identity that is neither entail? Many other content creators, as well as numerous academic works, have previously discussed these questions. For all intents and purposes, this section and this entire video will heavily draw inspiration from such works, but I do not want it to be a heavily researched academic essay that is hard to digest. If you are interested in learning more about these questions, Judith Butler's work Undoing Gender is a contemporary classic that always deserves a read, and Philosophy Tube's video on identity is still one of the clearest and most interesting video that deserves many rewatches. In short, one's identity in modern day society is based on forms of societal consensus. Regardless if it's gender, race, nationality, or any characteristics that were commonly seen as innate, or other forms of identity that we assume based on our past experiences such as professions, criminal records, or social status, and marked you as a social object and hence used to distinguish and categorize individuals from one another. Simultaneously, identity is also a form of self-respect or dignity. For instance, when an individual declares themselves as an American, the significance extends beyond their upbringing and cultural heritage, encompassing a sense of pride and belonging derived from shared experiences within the community, as well as a reflection of their desired perception. Both forms of identity coexist with each other and influence each other. If someone were socially categorized as certain identity, it also influences how they perceive themselves, who they are likely going to form community with, and how they would then project their actions back into the society. However, it is also important to point out that for most individuals, they often care about different aspects of their identity to varying degrees rather than the same importance across the board. Someone could identify as male within society but care less about expressing masculinity than spending time in their favorite hobby and being proud of their involvement with such communities. Under such a definition and understanding of identity, gender identity could then be understood as the social consensus and self-reflection in relation to one's gender. It could be many aspects intertwined together, including one's biological nature, their preferences in appearance and presentation, their affiliation with organizations and communities, their activities they partake in, and also their outlooks in life. Of course, the most prevalent way of determining one's gender identity is through the biological and physiological conditions of one's body, specifically the genital conditions at birth. However, even in the very early days of medical research, pediatricians have pointed out that though most children show similar tendencies and develop their gender identity in accordance with their body features, there is also a large group of children who may develop their body conditions and henceforth their gender identity in contradiction with their chromosomes. Contrary to the prevalent use of biological nature as a powerful justification for anti-trans propaganda, the medical community welcomed many early advocates of transgender rights in social care, viewing them as a natural phenomenon. Their insistence on distinguishing between sex and gender remains a fundamental concept in gender studies today. Nonetheless, it goes without saying that when people identify or associate with a certain gender identity, they are referring to a lot more than their biological body as a whole. Many developmental psychologists and sociologists have illustrated the prevalence and importance of gender roles, how they become some of the fundamental building blocks of society, but most importantly, how individuals who could not feel affinity towards traditional ideals of masculinity or femininity could develop gender and body dysphoria and have a heightened likelihood of anxiety and depression. Many of them are also the first few individuals to argue that gender ought to be believed and understood separately from biological sex, a distinction we still see commonly argued today in relation to transgender rights. Until now, people have viewed gender as a binary concept. Either they identify more with a male identity or a female identity, and there is a dearth of academic literature exploring the in-between spaces. However, since academic and public discourse tends to understand gender as a subjective concept rather than a physical reality, the concept of non-binary emerges from individuals who struggle to consistently affirm or associate with either side of the traditional gender. It is important to recognize that non-binary is not simply a third identity. Non-binary refers to an entire category of identities. There are individuals who sometimes feel affinity towards male and other times female. They are called gender fluid. There are individuals who feel they belong to neither of them, for example, a gender like me. And there are individuals who feel they may belong to both, two-spirited people. People can also identify themselves or feel differently about their gender identity at different points in their lives in relation to their lived experience and their evolving understanding of the issues. It also should be noted that non-binary is not a Western or even a recent invention. Many indigenous tribes and culture across the world have non-binary identities that were well accepted within their respective society. Some examples include the Mahus in Hawaii, Hijra in Hindu, Bakla in Philippines, and many more. Since this video is intended to reflect my own identity journey, it is only fair to outline how I reached this point so far. After all, even if identity is not entirely self-determining, the way I decided to be public and upfront of my identity is still my choice. I am also so used to outwardly claiming to be non-binary now that I occasionally forgot how hard the decision was and how far I have already come. During my youth, I knew I was different, but I do not know why or how. Bullies occasionally targeted me for my excessive effeminate behavior, but fortunately, my family and friends stood by me, providing unwavering support. Despite the progressive nature of my family and the environment I grew up in, the general public's awareness of queer individuals remained relatively limited. As someone who was also on the age spectrum but was unaware of it at the time, I dedicated the entire school year to my studies, paying little attention to my gender identity or sexual orientation. Despite not being actively conscious of my own queerness, there are many indications that I am queer and non-binary even when I was young. I used to be super into fandom culture. I was on Tumblr a lot of time and actively participated in writing fanfiction. In the meantime, I used to wrap blankets around my body and pretend to be a supermodel walking down the runway. I also have a distinctive voice, which teachers often confuse with other girls when they are not able to see my face. It is interesting how gendered my interests are in hindsight. In fact, one indication that parents report that they could predict their children's sexual orientation is through what toys or hobbies children took on as a child. Even though technically nothing stops a cis-straight child from being a theater kid or be interested in weird animes, these things have been a universal experience of queer youth. My self-awareness in terms of my sexual orientation did not come into effect until I was 18, which was probably the first time I felt romantic attraction towards someone. At the time, I was very confused and scared, having previously believed that being gay or queer in general was merely a fictional concept. The sudden realization that these identities are real and that you actively participate in them felt ostracizing. It felt like stepping into the world of Alice in Wonderland, where everything was familiar yet different due to a drastic shift in perspective. I am not going to extensively delve into things related to my sexuality, given gender identity and sexual orientations are interconnected but separate issues. Nonetheless, I do feel the need to point out that most non-binary individuals do also identify themselves with other parts of the queer community beforehand. In fact, many of the non-binary individuals first come to learn about the idea that gender could exist outside the binary within the queer community. Interestingly, my first encounter with the concept of non-binary was through pronouns. I was attending an event where they asked me what my preferred pronoun was, a question that was unfamiliar to me at the time. For some reason, I choose to fill out my pronouns as no preference during the event, and to my surprise, most people refer to me as they instead of he for the first time in life. It was indeed a strange sensation. English is not my first language, and I never really felt pronouns were more important than a language tool before, but I felt weirdly comfortable to hear others referring to me in a whole new way, in a way that feels more personal and accurate than something that is distant from me. After conducting additional research, I found myself immersed in the fascinating field of gender sociology. It weirdly simultaneously became not only my first step to understanding myself, but also one of my first introductions to sociology as well. I felt what people often do not talk about enough is how much effort is required before even being sure they are non-binary. Concepts such as gender, gender spectrum, and the meaning of non-binary are all complex concepts to understand from scratch, while there are also a billion labels that are presented to you that, at times, became overwhelming in terms of choices. Rarely do people just wake up and decide they are non-binary. It often takes years of introspection, experimentation, and learning before the affirmation takes place, and it most certainly is not an easy process. Despite at current day and age, there are many materials online that are extremely helpful, there are also a lot of confusing materials as well. Especially considering most people who participate within the discussion are often in contradiction with each other, since the nature of them happens in a very decentralized but not rigid way. Is non binary just an umbrella term or could stand alone as an identity? Are non binary individuals automatically trans? Can non binary persons still identify as gay or lesbian? I could do another separate video just on these questions, which at the end of it, there is still no answer to any of them. Just searching through the materials does not help clear the confusion I have or allow me to come to conclusion on my own. Therefore, I decided to start experimenting, start with pronouns. A lot of people have experienced gender euphoria when they just came out. I coincidentally did not have that. That does not mean I am not secure about my gender identity, but a lot of the differences I have only realized in hindsight, especially considering most of my experiments come during the pandemic period. However, there are a lot of examples of how much better I felt since I have come out as non-binary, more specifically agender. I grew a lot more confident over my appearance that is very gender ambiguous. I became a lot more content with myself not having masculine identities. I grew more confident socially interacting with people when they are able to adjust their expectations of me, and perhaps most importantly, I feel less the need to please or tolerate people who are not treating me kindly as well. Of course, even at this point, the journey is far from over. The fascinating thing about gender identity or any cultural identity is that people's understanding will forever evolve as time moves on, social perception changes, and you experience more things. A lot of the terms, including the definition of female and male, have changed drastically over time and are likely to keep evolving. Being non-binary allows me to freely explore my gender identity without the need to fit into a box that others have constructed. To be honest, coming out as non-binary did not significantly alter my life. Before and after I came out, my relationship with my family, my friends, and on a professional level almost remained the same. People often forget we are so much more than labels, and no matter what you label yourself, people still perceive you as what they are willing to see in you. Being non-binary does not change the fact that I am weird and socially a bit awkward, nor does it change the fact that I still cannot wake up early in the morning for my job. And it certainly does not change how much love and support my friends and family are able to warm my heart. A bit of life advice here. If someone changes how they treat someone, regardless of like or dislike, because of a singular identity they possess rather than their behaviors and heart, perhaps they never want to know you in the first place. However, it would be a lie to claim that things have completely unchanged. Mostly, I actively provide my preferred pronoun more often to others, which in a way really plays into the Gen Z leftist stereotype. Providing the pronoun has also been surprisingly useful in one aspect that I have not yet considered before, identifying who is a bigot or homophobic quicker. There have been people genuinely struggling with remembering people's pronouns, and I most certainly struggle and need to correct myself often. Nonetheless, there have also been a lot of individuals who refused to recognize my pronoun or lack of even a basic attempt to remember to use them. They are, in all, a very good indicator of how much someone is willing to respect you and whether, in the following conversations, they are a considerate enough person to not cause you any trouble. Being non-binary has also allowed me to have a healthier relationship with myself as someone who is struggling with a multitude of mental issues. Though cliché, coming out as an act does liberate me of a lot of my internalized fear of being abandoned, as well as hyper-consciousness of my appearance in front of others. There used to be a mental switch that I must always keep on, being hyper-aware of not only my behaviors in a public setting, but also how other people talk about me regarding my gender. I would often worry that my straight peers would not perceive me as masculine enough, that my queer peers would not find me flamboyant enough, that they would call me the F word if I was too outlandish, and that my own peers would scrutinize me for not doing enough to support my own community. For me, coming out feels more like a brain shutdown. It shut down parts of me that are uncomfortable with how I present myself to others when interacting with them. It shut down my anxiety regarding how I feel about myself and how others are potentially seeing me. I do not have to take an identity that requires me to put on an act, which saved me a lot of energy and time in life and allowed me to use them in other spaces where I can flourish and allow me to finally spend time bettering myself rather than loathing and self-doubt. Staying true to myself has given me extra motivation to represent my own identity within general society. Before coming out, I often felt displaced within the queer community in the West, particularly because I struggled to fit into the existing hypersexualized gay stereotype. Since came out, I have had many heartfelt conversations with friends regarding my decision, as well as my struggle to fit in with the general society and in the queer community, and how I wish to be a good representation for individuals like me who has struggled to find their voices. There have been, of course, struggles that come along with it, especially within the space of social media. It wasn't until I changed my gender on social media to reflect my own identity that I realized how bad of a space social media can be. Numerous instances of personal harassment have compelled me to secure my accounts, limiting access to only my friends. Surprisingly, most of the harassment did not originate from religious individuals, but rather from sexual harassment and strange stalkers who mistakenly believe I was assigned female at birth. Honestly, before the change, I had always thought the issue was too long-standing and reserved for more public personalities, but it has unfortunately and depressingly proved me wrong. Purposeful misgendering is also a very common occurrence, regardless of whether in real life or on social media. Hostility is especially common in non-queer friendly spaces regarding the use of pronouns, which unfortunately mirrors the political reality. I have yet to experience physical hostilities due to the issue, but unwarranted aggressiveness, vicious mockery, and explicit homophobia and transphobia have limited my capacity to interact with others in many instances, especially in compounding with my unassuming physical appearance and lack of confidence in general. It is crucial to acknowledge that my lived experience is not representative of all non-binary individuals, as it also encompasses many other identities such as being middle class, living in a large city, and having an accepting family, among others. This serves as a crucial reminder that generally, non-binary individuals do not enjoy the same level of privilege as I do. Many of the non-binary individuals still live in conditions that are incredibly unfriendly to them, especially in this political climate. For example, in America alone, more than 550 anti-LGBTQ bills have been introduced within the country, and more than 50 of them have been passed as laws, compounding with the fact that gender non-conforming individuals already experience a higher rate of physical and mental abuse, hate crimes, and mental issues. Many non-binary individuals are not as lucky as I am, and their voice is often lost to the void. As the year ends, most shops and retailers put their pride flag back in the storage, and we remain invisible to most people again. And as the sun sets again, I was alone in my studio apartment facing the mirror in my room, looking at my own reflection without anyone else noticing. Does my gender identity truly matter? Answering this question is a challenging task. I always find it odd when people became overly fixated on their identity. Humans are multifaceted, and there's no single word that should be able to describe anyone. If anything, identity is just a convenient label we gave ourselves so we can communicate information more efficiently. When we too hinge on the concept of identity, we're losing out on the chance to understand ourselves and other people in nuance. To some extent, I agree with the sentiment that labeling is in and of itself regressive, as it inevitably erases parts of individuals that could exist and blocks out opportunities that allow them to shine. However, identity plays a significant role, particularly when it comes to political issues. Whether we like it or not, how others see you interconnects and influences your relationship, self image, and feelings about others. Regardless of our disapproval, the perceptions of others will consistently shape our identity. Our skin color, language, heritage, appearance, family, friends, the school we go to, the games we play, and so much more are all a part of our identity. No matter how much we like to deny, our characteristics and how they are viewed by others will always be a part of the identity. This is a part of the reason why, no matter how enthusiastic a white person claims, they will never be a black person, and vice versa. In addition, there always exists tension between how you feel about yourself and how others feel about you and your actions. Associating oneself with the queer community and taking on the queer identity inherently comes with the risk of others changing their perception of you and how they behave or think about you, and being non-binary is not an exception. There is always a risk of individuals misgendering you, ridiculing you, and attempting to take away your rights simply because you choose to identify as a non-binary individual within the non-binary community. Why then? Why should I be able to have the ability to choose how I present myself, and why run the risk when I can be safe? An important part of the answer to both questions is how we can resolve our tensions amongst ourselves. What makes an identity important is partially the cathartic feeling, but also the acceptance of that community. What defines someone as non-binary is not only about finding comfort in defying societal and broader community expectations, but also about welcoming like-minded individuals into their community and safe space, allowing them to share their experiences and knowledge with you in a more authentic manner. In addition to accessing community support, coming out is also a powerful tool for building our own confidence and agency. Even when you are certain of your identity, queer identities face significant scrutiny. Most sane individuals would agree that a black person can be British, a rich person can be progressive, and a person with a disability can be an exceptional teacher, parent, and a friend. Individuals, even when they are performing queer acts in silence, will be questioned and denied as such, either claiming they need to be corrected and reformed or just confused, and there shall be course correction to their identities at a fundamental level, at least not since the eugenic movement died off. The most powerful thing about coming out is the narrative it proposes. You can demonstrate your self-assurance and comfort by deciding who can shape your self-perception over who cannot. In a world where there is not much human agency, as the societal norms shadow upon us and dictates our lives and relationships, and as we unintentionally pass along them to others, even the tiniest bit of feeling that you can control how you feel about yourself and how others can see you is empowering. It is an act of reclaiming our agency, especially when that agency is greatly hindered by millennials of silencing of queer voices and heteronormative structures that forces us to live against our own instincts. Possessing the agency to define ourselves and set out boundaries is immensely cathartic and significant for our existence in this world. After all these years, I can confidently assert that it truly matters. No matter how many confusions I have to clear up, how many criticisms I face, and how much hate and inequality I have to combat, it is worth it not to feel like I have to torture myself to conform to a standard that I know I will likely never reach, or that I have to pretend to be a part of a community that I never felt I belonged to. It made me realize that you are your biggest enemy and your biggest ally. So long as you feel comfortable in your skin, no matter how harsh the outside world is, you can find your inner peace and improve yourself. Beyond providing self-assurance, It also serves as a means of initiating a small grassroots movement in your community. There is no better way to educate people who truly care about you and want to learn more than by allowing them to directly face reality. Furthermore, for many individuals who lack the courage to come out or face life threatening consequences for doing so, simply knowing that there is someone out there who shares your experiences is empowering and cathartic. Therefore, it does matter. Whether it matters to us or not, it also affects those around us. One day, I aspire to live in a world where nuance prevails over the simplistic labels we assign to each other. However, wishing upon a star that humans can easily change their perception is an impossible solution to begin with. Until that happens, we still need to care about it and fight against the world and those who wishes us harm. When I initially decided to write an essay about myself, I must admit that my motivation was partially selfish. I want people to see me, agree with me, and care about me, not just as a random YouTuber doing things for fun. I want to establish emotional connections with people, but I don't want to invest a lot of time and effort in building strong relationships, which would drain my energy. However, there are numerous events and experiences that requires reflection before I can move forward again. To me, what makes human unique is our capacity for self-awareness and introspection. We're not only trying to do the things we do and feel the things we feel, but we also look back and try to understand why they happen and what we can learn from them. I'm grateful that, in today's digital age, I have access to a wealth of knowledge proposed by some of the greatest philosophers out there. A wide range of individuals that are willing to assist me in my endeavor to learn more about myself, and infinite possibilities for me to constantly experiment with my identity safely. The essay is both harder and easier to write than I imagined. Organizing my thoughts becomes an instinct after some time, and it's not as chaotic as I initially believed, but harder in the sense that it is incredibly hard to select amongst the millions of random thoughts in my head what is worth sharing and what I should not share to protect my private identity. The internet offers both advantages and disadvantages. It allows you to share anything you want, and there are always people who are willing to listen. However, you must carefully curate your image to be vulnerable enough that people are willing to listen, but not so vulnerable that they feel you are a weirdo and actively attack you. At the end of the self-reflection journey, I have learned a lot. Mostly, I was finally able to put the theories I have read over the years together with my personal experiences. There is an ancient Chinese proverb: read thousands of books and travel thousands of miles. Knowing theories is wonderful, but you never truly learned them by heart if you're not able to comprehend them emotionally, and the experience is worth nothing if you could not rationalize it sensibly. Nevertheless, there are still numerous things to learn and observe. I would love to hear what the experiences of other people are like and how they navigate around the world with their identity. Humans change based on their experiences, and it's likely that I will also change my perspective on my identity in the future. Over the years, I may take on many new identities and lose some, just as I have for the past years of my life. Every time I look in the mirror for my reflection, I feel comfortable knowing that I have grown a bit more than yesterday, and it reminds me of how far I have come and how far I may yet go. It gives me courage and confidence to move on with my life. I don't wish to be anyone else but myself. Hey, if you're watching this far, uh, thanks. This video is pretty hard to make, as in, like, there are a lot of things I want to talk about, but I don't know what to write, and Sometimes it's overwhelmed me. It took me way longer than I expected to make this. But then again, like, it did make it, so thanks for listening to the end. Also, if you're interested, please like and subscribe. I don't like when other YouTubers does this, but still, it's the end of the video. And if you enjoyed it, please do subscribe and like my video. And also comment would help as well. I haven't been too into YouTube. Like, this is kind of like this year is just testing. For next year, I'll put more efforts into it, and also at the same time, I will also try to stream more into like both on YouTube and also Twitch. So please also follow me elsewhere as well. But yeah, then again, thanks for watching. It really means a lot to me.